One thing we all know is that Steve Jobs loved great typography. After dropping out of Reed College, he dropped into some courses that interested him, such as a course on typography and different kinds of fonts. Because of this, over the course of Apple's history, the company has displayed fonts that stand out and that have been remembered. That's what I'm going to talk about today: the different fonts Apple has used in their marketing, the history of Apple fonts. In the very early days of Apple, there was no true font the company used throughout their marketing. But with the introduction of the Apple II in 1977, Apple started to use a very well-known font, Mater Tectura. Mater Tectura was created in 1975 in Austria by Othmar Mater. At that time, the font was known as New and Modern, which appealed to the eyes of Steve Jobs. According to the Rainbow Apple logo creator Rob Janoff, the typeface was selected for its playful qualities and techno look. The font was primarily used on the Apple IIs and was used on a regular basis until the introduction of the Macintosh in 1984, but the font appeared in the introduction to some internal product videos until around 1986. Although Apple had a key part in the font's fame, it was most famously used by the shoe company Reebok until 2002. Since Mater Tectura was killed with the introduction of the Macintosh, Apple featured a new font that was used by the company for many years, Apple Grammon. The font was first displayed on the back of the Macintosh, stating Macintosh next to the Apple logo. The font was even used after Steve Jobs' resignation, used in almost every product Apple made. Although the font was used for the Mac and other Apple product lines, the Newton product line didn't use Apple Grammon, but it used Gill Sans. Although being used for almost 2 decades before Steve Jobs returned to Apple, Apple Grammon was most famously used when Steve Jobs returned in the Think Different ad campaign. Apple Grammon was also famous for being used in the back of the original iPod in 2001, but that would be the last time Apple would use the font. In 2002, Apple switched to Myriad Pro, a font created by Robert Slimback and Carol Twombly, who worked at Adobe. The font was first used on the second generation iPod, replacing Apple Grammon on the back. Myriad Pro has been used for just about every Apple product since 2002 and is featured on the keynote presentations made at Apple launches. The Myriad Pro font was mainly the semi-bold model, but starting in 2008 with the MacBook Air, a thinner version of the font, Myriad Pro Light, was used. Myriad Pro Light was also used in 2012 with the introduction of the iPhone 5 and has been in regular use since November 2013 with the introduction of the iPad Air. Since 2007, the font Helvetica was used in some of the software design iOS primarily. In iOS 7, an extra thin version of Helvetica New was used, and it was highly criticized as the font was less legible. In the final version of iOS 7, Apple switched the font slightly to a thicker version of Helvetica. Helvetica started to be in heavy use on macOS X with the release of macOS X Mavericks, but in the completely new redesign of OS X Yosemite, Helvetica New will be used across the entire user interface, making all Apple software use Helvetica. Apple has always cared about the design of their products, ever since the Apple II in 1977. And one of the main design features of any Apple product is a great font used throughout the hardware and the software. Fonts have always been in Apple's DNA, whether it was Steve Jobs' college days or the latest release of macOS 10. That was my video, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, I'll see you next time.